Welcome to Mindset, Money, Success. I'm your host, Loraine Marshall. Now, today I'm going to do something quite a bit different. I'm recording this with no idea of the podcast that I wanted to create, because I've been so involved with a lot of other things that I just haven't thought about what I want to talk about on the podcast. So what I'm doing is I'm going to look at how I've now got to a point of starting over, how I'm rebranding from one domain to another domain, and then looking at how I can focus more on the whole new episode of helping women and supporting women and advocacy. So it's all about what I want to do moving forward with my life, because I've basically been left in total economic devastation, because what I thought would happen didn't happen. And over 5 years of legal intimidation and litigation abuses from a former partner. Now, all I tried to do basically was negotiate. And every time I tried to negotiate, it was knocked back, or the goalposts were moved, or he tried to push the value of the settlement down. It was basically a nightmare. Didn't have any support, advocacy moving through all of everything that happened over 5 years. And even while I was under the threat of being evicted in December of 2024, I actually reached out again at the end of 2024 when a potential buyer came up, and introduced that potential buyer because he was interested in the house and the property. I wasn't going to do that. I ended up doing that because the new buyer was telling me that if he bought the house, he would agree to pay me a small fee, because I didn't have any way of moving out. I didn't have any support, safety net, didn't have any income. I was trying to create business, and I just it wasn't moving anywhere, basically. So that was the situation that I was going through. And I just think it's incredibly difficult to get a grip on starting over, setting up a business and doing something purposeful when you still have a civil court litigation hanging over your head, that you informed that you're going to be evicted within 3 months, which I was in October 2024. The lawyer sent me an email just telling me that the date had been set. It's December the 19th. And I was just like, what? Because I was already in the position of trauma, with all of the criminal litigations that were still live in the court. And I get this email to say, look, that's it, you're going to be evicted in December. But within another couple of weeks of that, October 2024, my lawyer then wrote to me and said, or called me and said, that the criminal allegations had been dismissed. So there was just the eviction hanging over my head. But I still couldn't focus. I still couldn't think of move forward. But all the way through, what I've done was learn new skills, because I started the blog, which was named Life Change Plans. And then I started writing articles for that blog. And every Monday I would think, right, it's Monday, I want to write an article. And every week, mostly I didn't miss. I just basically thought, right, it's Monday, I'm going to write an article and publish it, which I did. And then in the end of 2023, I was under a tremendous amount of pressure in the end of 2023. Didn't have any running water at the house because the water company had removed the water meter. So didn't have any water. I did get my electricity back on. But I started this podcast in November of 2023. And I had some support from a company in the UK who gave me some direction on how to get started, what I needed to do. And they were the ones who would edit and produce show notes and put the podcast out on on a platform for me. So I didn't have to think about how do I edit it, how do I get the show notes, what do I do. All I had to do at that point was think of the topic, what I wanted to talk about, produce the notes for that, and then get in front of the camera to record it. And I mean, some of the first episodes that I actually did, I didn't get in front of the camera. I basically recorded them without my face to the camera and then just used the audio, put it onto YouTube, put it onto the platforms. In fact, all I had to do was edit the YouTube version, whereas the company that was supporting me were editing the actual audios to put onto Spotify and put onto Apple through the platform. So that was the beginning of this podcast. And all I then focused on was Monday is I'm writing an article, and then in the middle of the week it was right, I need to create this podcast. And so there was two things running parallel, and that was basically me in survival mode. Articles and podcast, and that was it. And I was like connecting with people from on LinkedIn or in groups on Facebook and podcast groups, interviewing people. Some of the podcasts I was doing solo podcasts. And so it just keeps a focus, or it keeps you in a position where you've got all of this chaos, all of this drama, all of the manipulation going on with the litigations, the civil litigation, the criminal litigation in the background. And I was just on this path thinking, right, okay, I just have to create this podcast. I just have to create this article. So that was keeping me in a sort of stable situation. I couldn't think of anything else. That was that, and you don't have a lot of room, because when I wasn't creating for those two things, I was researching laws. I was researching the situation with the criminal court, researching the situation with the civil court. I was compiling the documents. I was keeping evidence. The emails and everything was going into a whole document, like ongoing documents for everything that was happening, basically. And so there was like time on that and time to do something for yourself. And I think that in itself was keeping me on a certain level, without too much trauma, although when the odd occasion of the Guardia Civil turning up at the gate without any appointment or knowledge of them going to arrive threw me off quite a bit. That was really bad. But I think that just learning about how to do this, just how to do the podcast, helped. Then having being actually interviewed by other people on their podcasts. So that was another thing that I just did one or two other people's podcasts to talk about what had happened, how I decided to write the book and things like that. So what I've done recently, because I didn't have the bandwidth before, right? So I did 2 actual interviews in 2025, which I didn't actually put out. I didn't promote the interviews that I did with these other podcasters. So what I've recently done is moved those 2 podcasts that, into Buy Me a Coffee. So I've put them onto the Buy Me a Coffee platform so people can go and check the episodes out. And moving forward, what I want to do is rebrand. I might have explained a little bit about that in the last week's episode, but what I'm doing is I had an old URL domain from 2017. So when I started actually putting that together, because I wanted to use a different brand for myself, and the domain I had, successwithlorraine.com, and I just repurposed it. I didn't want to buy something else or get involved in trying to think about what it is I was going to be doing. So I just used the domain that I already had purchased from 2017 and just started putting articles to that domain using the WordPress website that I already had and the hosting platform that I'd had for years and years, the hosting platform, because when I was in business for myself, I had my own domain for the business, and I used to create all the systems and I put them into the website. So, everything in the background of my business was created from myself. In the ideas and things I was doing, it was all my input. So this last weekend has been really exciting for me, because what I did was I just had this idea. I wanted to rebrand. So I thought, well, what can I rebrand as? And I put the podcast last week, I think I put Truth After Abuse. And so I was putting that into some of the tools that I'm using right now, which is AI tools. And I started to chat with Claude from Anthropic, and started to talk about the different things. And I mentioned this Truth After Abuse, which is partly the name of the group that I want to set up. So I came back with, that's fantastic and all of that. So I just thought, really? Then I bought the domain. And then I started to put together from Success with Loraine, transfer the articles over to truthafterabuse.com. And so it's set up. So I did that over the weekend, and I wouldn't stop until it was actually done. So I spent a whole day, I think, on Saturday and some of Sunday just to get that domain up and running and live. And it's a work in progress, but I don't care, to be honest, because if you're going to start something, don't make it perfect. Just get started. And I've heard this loads and loads and loads of times from people who are now multimillionaires, and they're telling people, look, you're going to start something, then just get started, because it's pointless saying, oh, well, I need to be this and I need to do that. You don't need everything in position, everything in place. It's the same when I started in business back in 2005. I hadn't a clue, right, about anything to do with property management, let alone student accommodation. And I just learned as I went along. I had a basic idea. So I then went, right, okay, that's the idea. I went into one of the search engines and I put that idea in. And I found a guy online who was in the UK, and he'd created a whole system which talked about how he was buying properties. He was buying properties, but while he was buying properties, he was the owner and the landlord at the same time, setting up the systems, so contracts for other for the tenants and things like that. And so one by one, there was like he'd created a whole folder of legal information, contracts, things that you need to know to actually set up and be a property investor and market your own properties and be legal at the same time. So what did I do? I thought, right, okay, I must have that. So I just bought that folder from his online shop and got it delivered, and basically modelled on some of the things that this property investor was doing in his business. So that's how I set up the business that I had no clue how to run back in 2005. And I think it was 2006 that I actually bought a domain and created a website for the business. And then once the website was created for that business, and it was just basically a work in progress again because we had a few houses, so it was basically set it up with the properties online so the students could see the properties without having to walk around the streets and look for the telephone numbers in the window. My business had the properties actually all listed inside of the website. So, this is the point. You don't really need to understand the full picture when you get started on the business, because you can learn as you go along. You can pivot if things not working out. You can make mistakes and learn from them. So it's all like an experience that you go through. And I was fortunate that the business didn't fail. In the first year, it didn't fail. What happened was I just had a piece of paper. So I just had this piece of paper and I just wrote on like, I want to double the income of the business in the first 3 months, and I want to double the income of the business in the next 3 months. So from 2005, then, the first 3 months, the income of that business doubled. And then in the next 3 months, the income of the business practically nearly doubled again. So what I'd wrote on that piece of paper was just came in. It just came in. Don't ask us how, it just did. Like one thing led to another thing. We had more landlords came forward, people who were getting their properties let. So I think it was word of mouth. So like one landlord spoke to a different landlord, and then they were ringing me, can you do something with this property? So one thing just led up to another. And like I say, that was just starting from no obviously information and just working through as things progressed. So at the minute, I've got this new domain, the truthafterabuse.com. I've set up my first page on there, and I'm transferring articles across little by little as I'm moving forward. And I've mentioned in the last episode, I'm creating a support group, but this is a low cost subscription for less than the price of a cup of coffee a month, where I can share my knowledge of how I've gone through that post-separation abuse, basically how I moved through the litigations, what I learned from that, the mistakes that I made so that you don't make the same mistakes as I did, and basically to empower more women, because I think sometimes the legal advice isn't the right advice and there is alternatives. And so I think we really need to know what is the best way. And when you are faced in a situation where you've got someone who is emotionally, psychologically manipulating, not just you, but manipulating his lawyers and the judges and making false statements to the court, we need to know how to get round all of that. Because while we are in that situation, we experience a lot of trauma, a lot of fear. And you're probably already in grief and you're probably already in shock. And so with grief, with shock, there's other emotions that come out. And some of the emotions could be anger, and that's a natural response to being falsely accused, or to have someone not pay the maintenance and child support, or won't settle the property issue because, they just don't want to get involved with any of the negotiation, whatever it is. You then left in a space of where am I going to find the money to pay for the mortgage, or what am I going to do now? And money issues is one of the things that causes the greatest fear. Housing insecurity, because there's lots and lots of women out there, I know for a fact, that when they've gone from a relationship in a property, it might be mortgaged or might not be mortgaged, then, and that relationship breaks down. And especially for younger people, and like myself, I was basically not, I was too trusting, to be honest, because I obviously really trusting of this guy that he would do the right thing. At the end of a relationship, that he would do the right thing. Now, he ended the relationship, but he didn't do the right thing. And so I know other women who've been through all of that, and when the case comes up, or the other person is like, right, that's it, you're going to be evicted, the courts just basically ignore anything that's gone on in the past and just go, right, that's it, you're evicted. And I've come across women who have been living in their cars, women who have been living on the street because they didn't have anywhere to go, because they've been isolated from the person who was their partner, boyfriend, or whatever. So isolated from family, friends, nowhere to go to, and so basically really on the bottom of the emotional energy spiral, where you've got nothing left. And for some women, even entering into refuge has been traumatic, because I've spoken to these people, I've spoken to women who've gone through all of this, and it's not a good place to be. So yes, the whole situation, I think we need to have support. We need to have the right support. We need to know how to get through a situation like this and what is the legal reality, because mostly I've found that the legal professionals don't often realise the situation of emotional, psychological, and economic abuse that goes on in the situation. They don't even realise the isolation that a person has probably gone through or is isolated, but that person doesn't even know. And the situation of abuse, I actually called it hidden forms of abuse, because the victim often doesn't understand that what they've experienced is in fact abuse. The word or the term that has been put into law in the UK is coercive controlling behaviours, where the abuser, the perpetrator, actually uses all of the different methods to devalue, criticise, humiliate, condition the person. It's like a grooming process, the love bomb situation, where that person is groomed to think that you're in a brilliant relationship with them, and all of the time that you're going through that, this devaluation, and it's like they're chipping away at that person's self-esteem, at the things that they believe in. They can turn everything around and you're always to blame. So having a group where we can share the stories, we can share the knowledge that we have experienced, and we can work on solutions. I have my solutions and how I've survived, but others might have more solutions of surviving and how to get through things when you basically hit the ground and you think, what am I going to do now? So this is why I'm looking at a very low priced support group and opening that up so that we can actually meet. And the motto would be, together we are stronger. Because when we can share across different countries and say, well, this is what worked for me, or this didn't work, this is the mistake I made, then we are in a position to then look at how can this become the campaign, how can that become part of how we can change things, how can we put this into some documents that we can put out there and actually make a difference, you know. People who can get publicity, for example, people who can speak. I know women in the UK, there's one in particular, she has been doing a similar thing for I think more than 10 years now, and she started as a volunteer project, and now she is speaking out, and she has been on radio, she's been on TV, she's been in magazines and articles. She even trains and goes to police, and she's trained with police, and she's trained other different organisations in what coercive control is all about, how it's just the power dynamic, how it's not just a bruise, it's not just a physical incident, it's not one incident, it's not one verbal abuse. It is a whole pattern that starts chipping away, isolating the person, using control financially, the verbal aggression, the anger outbursts and verbal aggression to shut that person down, because wherever that person was talking about at that point, they know now, oh, if I talk about that, then he's going to get angry, so I have to keep my mouth shut. And so this is how the coercive control works, because it's telling the person, you have to be, you do as I say, basically. This is what it is. It's like the person is like controlling your emotions and enforcing their rules. they make you dependent upon them, or the opposite, where you go out and do all of the work and bring the money in, and then they are dependent because they don't have the work, they don't have whatever it is. And the other side of the coin is from the wealthy person who can provide everything, to the other side of the coin where they are in and out of work all of the time and can't get credit because they've got a bad credit record. And so then whenever they need help, they come back to you and say, can you help me with this amount of money? Can you loan us this amount of money? And you end up in a situation of being coerced into debt, right? And I've been there. I got the t-shirt, so I know what it's like. Thing is, I was also working as a volunteer in an organisation when I was in Sunderland. So I actually learned the skills of how to deal with multiple debt and how to actually help people when they were coming into the organisation, how to help people to get into control of the multiple debts and to manage what income they had, and how, in some cases, that the debts could be written off. And so with that knowledge, I want to help other women. I've got other skills as well, obviously. And so that's why I want to put it into this private group and share those things out so that can help more people. I don't want to charge a huge amount of money. So this is why it's only going to be less than a cost of a coffee per month. All right. So now I've been talking now for about half an hour on this podcast. So what I'm going to do now is close down the podcast because I'm like thinking because I'm still in a situation myself, I'm still in a situation of like trying to work out where I'm going to earn from, what I'm going to produce, what I'm going to make as an offer. So the podcast that I have, Mindset, Money, Success, it's going to stay the same. It's not going to be rebranded. I'm keeping it as is. I've got 101 episodes out now on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. So I don't want to change the podcast name. And I think it's a good name for women who are looking to rebuild, women who have like become single because of any of the 3Ds in relationship endings, which I've been through all three. First of all, divorce. Then I had my partner who was my partner in life and in business, and he died suddenly. Death of a partner. And then the last one, which was one of the best relationships, one of the worst relationships I ever had. And that relationship ended in what I term as a 4-sentence discard speech. 3 days of relationship endings. So the podcast actually needs a little bit of income coming in to help it keep going. And so if you're someone who can support this podcast, I've linked Buy Me a Coffee to the podcast. The link is in the show notes, and it'll also be in the description below the video. And any donations that you can make with Buy Me a Coffee will be gratefully accepted and will help to keep the Mindset, Money, Success podcast on the air. And it'll be great to continue doing the podcast. And if you're an author, a coach, a therapist, and you deal with trauma, or you deal with the recovery after narcissistic abuse or after coercive control, or you deal with relationships, breakdowns, divorces, whatever, then why don't you apply to become a guest and we can have a chat on mindset, money, success. So that's it for this week, and see you next time. Bye for now.